Hello, team. Welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. This is Ukraine War news update. I don't know, third part thereof for today. If you include the Kursk update for the 18th of August 2024. But I'm going to release this on the 19th. I'm just a couple of hours away from that, my time. This is my last evening of the holiday, and we're packing our bags and whatnot. I thought I'd just do a quick one because I don't know whether I'll be able to do one tomorrow morning. I might be able to squeeze out a hits and losses video, but just in case, I'm recording this uh, ahead of that eventuality. Right, we're going to start with Kim.com. Kim.com is a really annoying human being. He is big on Twitter. He's a conspiracy theorist. He's an absolute nut job who spreads disinformation and huge amounts of pro Russian sentiments. And indeed, who to follow, the suggestion by X, by Twitter, under Kim.com is Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Mario Norfal. So if you know, well, Mario Norfal is just full of unfiltered, unbiased, verified 24/7 breaking news, unfiltered, unbiased, absolute claptrap. Dr. Jordan B. Peterson, these are the kind of people that would be associated with Kim.com. So he is not a good person and he is full of shite. Right. When we're talking about disinformation, it's people like this that are part of a large part of the problem. Really is a bit of an issue, this chap. I could wax lyrical about how much of a tool he is. But the news is that New Zealand is set to extradite the internet mogul, as Julie Davis calls him, Kim.com, to the US after the country's justice minister gave his approval on Thursday. Now, this has been a 12-year ongoing issue, and it finally seems to be coming to a head. As Ukraine Battlemap says, New Zealand will extradite pro-Russian propagandist Kim.com to face criminal charges in the US on conspiracy to commit racketeering, conspiracy to commit money laundering, and criminal copyright infringement. He faces a maximum of 20 to 55 years in prison if found guilty. Reuters reports it like this: Kim.com to be extradited from New Zealand after a 12-year fight with US. About bloody time, mate. Look, it's just not cool, eh? Wellington reports from Wellington, Kim.com, who is facing criminal charges relating to the defunct file sharing website Mega Upload, will be extradited to the US from New Zealand, the NZ Justice Minister said on Thursday. German-born.com, who has a New Zealand residency, has been fighting extradition to the US since 2012 following an FBI-ordered raid on his Auckland mansion. Justice Minister Paul Goldsmith signed an extradition order for .com, a spokesperson for the Ministry of Justice said. Quote, I considered all of the information carefully and have decided that Mr. .com should be surrendered to the US to face trial, Goldsmith said in a statement. As a common practice, I've allowed Mr. .com a short period of time to consider and take advice on my decision. I will not, therefore, be commenting further at this stage. In a post on social media website X on Tuesday.com said, quote, the obedient US colony in the South Pacific just decided to extradite me for what users uploaded to Mega Upload, in what appears to be reference to the extradition order. Reuters could not immediately contact him for a response. US authorities say .com and three other Mega Upload executives cost film studios record companies more than $500 million by encouraging paying users to store and share copyrighted material, which generated more than $175 million in revenue for the website. So on and so forth. That's what's going on. But the wider picture is that this person, okay, he's committed copyright infringement crimes or misdemeanors, and that's what it's going to be done on. But if this guy gets put away and is unable to spread disinformation, then this is like a super spreader being shut down. And this is great for truth and facticity around the world. So I am not at all upset that this gargantuan tool bag has been is on the edge of being extradited and hopefully sentenced with, I don't know, something, anything. Right. Talking about disinformation, and I'm not going to read through this thread because it is a big long thread on Georgian Dream, but Terje Helland here gives us a bit of an insight to Georgian Dreams disinformation machine. So these are the pro-Russian Georgian political ruling party, uh, and they have a lot of help powered by Russian digital experts. How fake news, fake accounts, and cross-platform manipulation keep a pro-Russian agenda alive in Georgia. Let's dive into this breaking news. Right, we'll just do a couple of these, and you'll get the idea. Georgian Dream has been linked to a sophisticated network of coordinated inauthentic behavior, CIB, backed by Russian marketing firms like IMA Digital that flood social media with fake accounts and misleading content. Meta's latest report exposed 76 fake Facebook accounts, 30 pages, and 11 Instagram accounts created by a Russian based network targeting in Georgia and Armenia and Azerbaijan. Their goal to prop up the ruling Georgian Dream Party. This network wasn't just on Facebook, it extended across platforms like YouTube, Telegram, and TikTok to create the illusion of legitimacy, producing fictitious news stories that appeared to come from independent sources. How many times have we heard this recently where what was it with regard to the UK riots, the Southport riots, where Channel 3 Now, this fake Russian, well, it wasn't a fake Russian, I don't know whether you'd call it fake. It was a Russian YouTube channel that was doing stuff to do with cars and whatnot, and then reinvented itself a few years ago to start pumping out uh, kind of pro-Russian. I hate to call it news, but you know, information with an agenda in mind. And in light of the Southport stabbings in the UK, which was done by a 17-year-old kid of Rwandan descent who'd been born in Wales to Christian parents, so not what was reported by this kind of fake news channel or whatever you want to call it, who then reported that this guy had got off an illegal immigrant boat and was on the MI6 watch list, and he was a kind of sort of um, Muslim terrorist, fundamentalist, so on and so forth, and then stabbed these kids in Southport. That then caused the right wing provocateurs to get out on the streets and cause all sorts of trouble. And these sparked a series of riots. And it all came down to that disinformation that was peddled by this essentially anonymous Russian um, YouTube channel, or like, anonymous as in there's no um, provenance to it. There's no knowing who these people are. And what we've seen before is that these random YouTube sources will put something out into the information ecosystem that get picked up by local news sources and then spread it. And then those local news sources will continue to spread it so that it gets picked up internationally, and then gets picked up by mainstream media sources internationally, and then gets imported into Russia by genuine mainstream media sources that are, whether they know this or not, they probably do know this, are taking that news um, story that has been invented by a Russian plant pretending to be a YouTube channel based in wherever. It gets exported to the world and imported back into Russia, and it was the Russians that started it. Anyway, it's kind of what this chap is talking about here. This network wasn't just on Facebook, it extended across platforms like YouTube, Telegram, and TikTok to create the illusion of legitimacy, producing fictitious news stories that appeared to come from independent sources. So that's that whole process. In Georgia, the disinformation campaign specifically targeted the protests against a foreign agent law, a bill heavily criticized for mirroring Russia's crackdown of NGOs, non-governmental organizations, and civil society. Protesters were vilified, while Georgian Dream was praised. The fake news stories, I have a feeling I'm going to read most of this. Fake news stories appeared on fictitious websites, some with local Georgian branding, where they framed protesters as foreign agents, spies, working to destabilize the country, a key tactic to discredit the opposition and protect Georgian Dream's power. These operations didn't act alone. The Moscow-based digital marketing firm IMA Digital was found to be behind many of these accounts and fake websites, all designed to manipulate Georgian public opinion and create division. These fake accounts amassed thousands of followers, 3,800 on Facebook, 1,850 on Instagram, spending $77,000 on ads to bolster their reach, all paid in US dollars, showing the scale and intent of their operations. $77,000 may not seem like a lot of money, but in a relatively small social media market like Georgia, with a population of only 3.7 million people, it's a massive amount, and that is just the identified and known figure. The campaigns were aimed at amplifying pro Georgian dream narratives while criticizing Western influence. Russian involvement also aimed to ensure that Georgian dream remained a stable partner for Moscow's interests in the region. Okay, pause. One of the big asymmetries in the world that really frustrates me is that we have no troll farms, no information um, systems, information propagation systems that work in favor of the West, of democracy. And we seem to be fighting fire all the time, playing whack a mole with these nuggets of disinformation that find themselves into our information spaces. And we're not doing that ourselves. I'm not talking about lying. I'm not talking about disinforming, say, the Russian population, but I'm saying informing them with facts and truth about what the West is actually like and giving them a positive narrative of what democracy can do for them. So it should be, fighting disinformation with positive information, not like for like. We don't do that. And what the Russians do is they understand the power of manipulation and information and disinformation to the point where they are spending really good money that begets a huge return on investment for them. The point being that $77,000 is not a lot of money, and they're getting a really good return on investment in terms of being able to dictate the outcome of a country, politically speaking. So I'm not saying that the entire outcome of Georgia will be defined by that expenditure, but it's part of a project that the sort of project that I think Russia are really, really good at, and we in the West are just not very good at. The campaigns were aimed at amplifying pro-Georgian Dream narratives while criticizing Western influence. Russian involvement also aimed to ensure that Georgian Dream remained a stable partner for Moscow's interests in the region. A key figure in these campaigns was Mikhail Zhigenti, leader of the New Solidarity for Peace party, whose comments were weaponized by these fake news outlets. His claims that the protests were US-backed fed directly into the Kremlin's narrative. Solidarity for Peace party is a pseudo-independent party that effectively acts as one of Georgian Dream's openly pro-Russian factions, where it's impossible for Georgian Dream to be overtly anti-Western due to their pro-Western electorate. They use them to express those views. The now notorious Real Reliable News RRN website played a critical role. It's part of the Russian operation known as Doppelganger, which spreads disinformation under the guise of legitimate news, targeting Georgia, Ukraine, and other post-Soviet states. And there's an example of a sort of website that you would see that they would produce. Often these kind of websites are made to look very much look like other genuine mainstream media outlets. The other thing they do is create mainstream media outlets fake pages, so something like a CNN or a BBC News article, but it's not actually from CNN or BBC. Anyway, to continue, one of RRN's key articles was titled "Georgia Refuses to Become Another Ukraine," reinforcing Kremlin-backed messaging that the protests were an external plot to destabilize Georgia, just as Russia portrays Western involvement in Ukraine. To give their disinformation legitimacy, bots and fake accounts push these narratives on X, formerly Twitter, even tagging US politicians like Congressman Matt Gaetz. Classic. This tactic spread confusion and undermined international support for the protest. The Meta investigation found that 39 X accounts or Twitter accounts were central to amplifying Zhigenti's interview, pushing false narratives at scale. These accounts were swiftly shut down, but not before reaching the global audience. Another figure linked to this campaign was Otar Skaladze, a former Georgian prosecutor general with deep ties to Russia's FSB. His involvement underscores the extent of Russian influence in propping up Georgian Dream. Meta's investigation also highlighted how Russian influence operations co-opt real people, sometimes unknowingly, to boost their narratives. In Georgia, they used local content creators to post videos that aligned with their disinformation campaigns. The involvement of IMA Digital is crucial. Based in Moscow, this marketing firm has orchestrated multiple campaigns using fake accounts and pages to create a facade of legitimacy for pro-government messaging in Georgia. The connection between GD, Georgian Dream, and Moscow is now clear. As Georgia approaches the October 2024 parliamentary elections, expect more disinformation efforts like this. Russia's influence aims to keep Georgian Dream in power by manipulating public opinion and discouraging Western alignment. The proof is clear. Fake accounts, fake news, and Russian support are shaping political discourse in Georgia. These operations are designed to divide society, weaken protests, and ensure Georgia remains in Russia's sphere of influence. We must stay informed and vigilant. The tactics of Georgian Dream, with support from Russian digital experts, threaten democracy not only in Georgia but globally. Let's continue to expose these disinformation campaigns and promote transparency. That's really good from Terja Helland. And I think I've shared a couple of his posts on Georgia before because I recognize the way he ends that. Really good information about how disinformation is able to run rife with the use of social media, manipulating social media to a political end. Now, in a year of dozens of elections, says Rest of the World, which is a media site here, restoftheworld.org, in the year of dozens of elections around the globe, in fact, this is the year that there are more there are more elections this year than in the history of the world. It's just one of those weird times where there's this big confluence of electoral pathways that have led to 2024, making it a really, really important year. Twitter is making it easy for bots to meddle, says this site. And you know my views on Elon Musk and Twitter, and the ability for Twitter to be manipulated by nefarious disinformation entities is really problematic. As this piece says, in at least two cases, Twitter failed to take down accounts linked to influence operations when notified by researchers. The loss of free API access and the threat of legal action has dissuaded researchers from seeking out bad actors. Elon Musk's public efforts to drive out bot accounts has had little effect. So he talked very publicly about trying to drive out bots and trolls, especially when he was taking over Twitter, complaining to Dorsey at the time, who previously ran Twitter, that, well, 5% of you seem to indicate that 5% of accounts are fake. That's way too many given the number of accounts there are, and so therefore I'm not going to buy it. But by that time, he was already legally bound to buy it and had to buy it for, what was it, 44 billion anyway. So there you go. He used that as an excuse to try not to buy it, but that means that he must have had some idea that there were an awful lot of fake accounts on Twitter, then promptly bought it and got rid of all his moderators because he is a free speech absolutist. So he has, instead of turn that around or use that as a point of focus, he has just allowed disinformation to run rife because he has allowed fake accounts to run rife and has done very little to close down bots and trolls, but from what I can gather anyway. And now there is news that Elon Musk's financial headaches continue at Twitter as an advertiser's boycott has caused an 84% collapse in revenue, leaving Musk admitting Twitter could face bankruptcy and asset managers fearing he will devalue Tesla as he sells off up to $2 billion of shares to prop it up. So he's got a bit of a dilemma here. It's like, does he keep pumping money into X or Twitter to prop it up and at the expense of Tesla as he kind of cross-pollinates, cross-subsidizes these different entities, or does he cut loose Twitter? Does he eventually, overcome the sunk cost fallacy and cut his losses and offload Twitter? We will see. But it is a real problem for disinformation. It continues to be. And I know I use it. And I know many of you say, why are you continuing to use Twitter. It is the only um, media site that aggregates as much information as I need from all the mainstream media sources and all the people on the ground in Ukraine and in Russia and all these different places, as well as all the OSINT community is on Twitter. Basically, there is no viable alternative to do what I do without Twitter. What I'd hope is that someone decent takes over Twitter and turns it into something that it could be rather than something that it presently is. Now, Texas Anton Gerashchenko, to change direction here, says the Texas-based oilfield services company SLB is expanding its operations in Russia, filling the vacancy left by Western competitors, the Financial Times reported. SLB, previously known as Schlumberger, is the world's largest offshore drilling company, continued to operate in Russia after the full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, even as other oil giants left the country. SLB's Russian subsidiary signed new contracts and advertised over 1,000 new jobs in Russia since December 2023. Open positions include drivers, chemists, and geologists. According to the Financial Times, in December 2023, SLB entered into a contract with Vnigny, a Russian state-funded institution that conducts geological research for fossil fuel production. Russian corporate databases also show that SLB registered 2 new trademarks in July 2024. SLB announced in July 23 that it would immediately stop all shipments of products and technology from its facilities into Russia in response to growing sanctions on the Russian oil industry. But Russian customs filings show that while SLB did stop importing supplies from its facilities abroad, it continued to import products and technology from other sources. Of $17.5 million in equipment shipped between August and December 2023, 2.2 million was declared to have been originally manufactured by SLB. So this is another one of these companies, that continues to operate, servicing Russia, making money in Russia, and not really adhering to sanctions or the general feel of the sanctions. So I think a morally dubious entity. Speaking of which, Russian nuclear giant Rosatom directed income through a Dutch subsidiary. Rosatom uses a Dutch subsidiary to move hundreds of millions in profits, according to Dutch news outlet NOS, citing a report from Uranium One Cooperative. So there are many companies that are doing this, and it's great that they get found out and exposed in the media. Let's hope that something happens concerning those two entities. Now, Russia, quote, the government has extended the ban on gasoline exports until the end of the year. So Russia is not exporting gasoline again. This is an issue that has beset them for a number of months since Ukraine started hitting refineries and oil depots. They put a ban on exporting gasoline, and that has been extended and then extended and then extended. This is a real indicator that Russia is in a spot of bother. Quote, the ban will be in effect from September the 1st to December the 31st, 2024. So they keep extending it for, say 3 months or quarter, it seems. However, it is important to note that this is not set in stone. It could be lifted, but still, it shows that Russia is in trouble with its fossil fuel industry. This is Kiev Independent. The Ukraine's economy is feeling the labor crunch brought on by Russia's war. Kiev and Moscow plan to continue transmitting gas to Europe despite Ukraine's incursion into Kursk Oblast near a key cross-border transit point for the fuel. So those are two stories that the Kiev Independent talks about there, both concerning, continuing to make money at a time of war. Now, Ukraine's economy is in a similar predicament to Russia's one, in which there is a shortage of labor, causing inflation and wage spirals as they try and attract people to jobs. You've had many men going off to war and women indeed getting involved in the armed forces, and you've had a huge number of people leave the country, both male and female, to go abroad as refugees or to escape draft, and that has led to a severe shortage of workers in key industries. That's a massive challenge for Ukraine in the way that it is about Russia. So whenever I talk about this being a problem for Russia, don't think that Ukraine is inoculated from the same kind of pressures. But yeah, there you go. To Kiev Independent again, three Ukrainians are suspected of port arson in Croatia. Croatian police are searching for three Ukrainian citizens suspected of setting multiple ships on fire at the Medulin port on May the 14th. The fire destroyed 22 vessels, caused over $2 million of damage. I mean, that's absolutely incredible there. We'll just read this a little bit. So, Croatian police are searching for three Ukrainian citizens suspected of setting multiple ships on fire on the Istrian Peninsula on August the 17th. A fire on the night of May the 14th destroyed 22 boats in the Medulin port. No people were injured, and police in Istria launched an investigation into the fire. Police said the investigation identified three suspects, 28-year-old and two 25-year-olds from Ukraine. The suspects reportedly entered Croatia from Poland on May the 14th and accessed the marina at 3:40 local time in the morning. According to investigators, two of the suspects stood guard while the third slipped through the fence and launched a Molotov cocktail at one of the moored vessels. The fire then jumped to the other boats, destroying 22 vessels completely and causing damage to several others. So it could be that they're only going for one boat, but ended up destroying 22. The total damage incurred to the yachts and boats amounted to €2 million. The Ukrainian suspects have not been arrested and are not currently located on Croatian territory. Police referred the case to the state's prosecutor's office, who is reportedly preparing for an international arrest warrant. Croatia is one of Europe's top destinations for tourism and sailing, so it could well be that they were trying to hit, I don't know, a Russian oligarch's boat or something like that, and it ended up blowing or destroying lots of other boats. Now, Nord Stream pipeline is back in the news again. So this is Dmitry Alperovich saying Nord Stream pipeline destruction story. Zelensky, this is according to new information out, and this is a Wall Street Journal here. Zelensky initially approved a plan to destroy the Nord Stream gas pipeline, according to one officer who participated and three people familiar with it. But later, when the CIA learned of it and asked the Ukrainian president to pull the plug, he ordered a halt. This is where it gets a bit funky, as according to this article. General Zaluzhny, the commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian armed forces at the time, who was leading the effort, nonetheless forged ahead. This may be a source of discord between Zaluzhny and Zelensky, famously not getting on until he was then removed from his post and became the UK ambassador. Anyway, this is quoting from the article. An attack of this scale is a sufficient reason to trigger the collective defense clause of NATO, but our critical infrastructure was blown up by a country that we support with massive weapons shipments and billions of cash, said a senior German official familiar with the probe. Now, this could go some way to explaining why Germany has cooled off rather a bit with the support for Ukraine in terms of financial military aid packages going forward. They're fulfilling current packages, but there is also, though, the idea that Germany is entering a key electoral session or season with regard to some key, is it regional elections that are due to take place? So there are potentially many reasons why Germany has cooled off on, or at least several reasons why they've cooled off on support for Ukraine at the moment, but it is causing a bit of consternation within Ukraine. But I don't know. It might be related to the idea that Ukraine could be responsible for the Nord Stream gas pipeline destruction. In May of 2022, a handful of senior Ukrainian military officers and businessmen had gathered to toast their country's remarkable success in halting the Russian invasion, buoyed by alcohol and patriotic fervour. Somebody suggested a radical next step, destroying Nord Stream. The journal spoke to four senior Ukrainian defense and security officials who either participated in or had direct knowledge of the plot. All of them said the pipelines were a legitimate target for Ukraine's war of defense against Russia. Following the May 2022 pact between the businessmen and the military officers, it was agreed that the former would finance and help execute the project because the army had no funds and was increasingly relying on foreign financing. A sitting general with experience in special operations would oversee the mission, which one participant described as, quote, a public-private partnership. He will report directly to the head of Ukraine's armed forces, the four-star General Zaluzhny. Within days, Zelensky approved the plan. According to the four people familiar with the plot, all arrangements were made verbally, leaving no paper trail. But the next month, the Dutch military intelligence agency, MIVD, learned of the plot and warned the CIA, according to several people familiar with the Dutch report. US officials then promptly informed Germany, according to US and German officials. The CIA warned Zelensky's office to stop the operation, US officials said. The Ukrainian president then ordered Zaluzhny to halt it, according to Ukrainian officers and officials familiar with the conversation, as well as Western intelligence officials. But the general ignored the order, and his team modified the original plan, these people said. One crew member, a military officer on active duty, who was also fighting in the war, was a second skipper, and four were experienced deep sea divers. People familiar with the German investigation said the crew included civilians, one of whom was a woman in her 30s who trained privately as a diver. She was handpicked for her skills, but also to lend more plausibility to the crew's disguise as friends on holiday, according to one person familiar with the planning. Witnesses on other yachts moored in Sandham noted that the Andromeda was the only boat with a small Ukrainian flag hoisted on its mast. Hashtag OPSEC. I mean, that's, yeah, bit of an issue, isn't it, when you're doing something as subterfuge as that. Polish officials initially refused to hand over the CCTV footage of the port this year. They told their German colleagues that the footage had been routinely destroyed shortly after the Andromeda departed. The Polish Internal Security Agency, ABW, said that no such footage exists. The Netherlands built deep intelligence gathering capacity in Ukraine and Russia after Russian-backed paramilitaries downed a Malaysia Airlines plane flight originating from Amsterdam over eastern Ukraine, two Dutch officials said. Zelensky took Zaluzhny to task, but the general shrugged off his criticism, according to three people familiar with the exchange. Zaluzhny told Zelensky that the sabotage team, once dispatched, went incommunicado and couldn't be called off because any contact with them could compromise the operation. In June, German officials issued a confidential arrest warrant for a Ukrainian citizen who the Germans believe was one of the crew members. Authorities in Poland didn't act on the warrant. The instructor is believed to have since returned to Ukraine. Poland's failure to arrest him was a major blow to a German probe because he and other suspects have now been tipped off and will avoid traveling outside Ukraine. People familiar with the investigation said Ukraine doesn't extradite its own citizens. The general tasked with commanding the operation enlisted some of Ukraine's top special operations advisors and with experience in orchestrating high-risk clandestine missions against Russia to help coordinate the attack. One of them was Roman Chervinsky, a decorated colonel who previously served in Ukraine's main security and intelligence service, the SBU. In a subsequent interview, Chervinsky said that the sabotage had two positive effects for Ukraine. It helped loosen Russia's grip on the European countries supporting Kiev, and it left Moscow with only one main avenue for channeling gas to Europe, pipelines traversing Ukraine, for which it collects transit fees. And of course, that is what has been turned off to, although I hadn't heard much about this for some time, Slovakia and Hungary, causing issues there. Now, I don't know about fact checking any of this and how true this is from Wall Street Journal. It does possibly explain some friction between Zelensky and Zelensky. It might also explain Germany cooling off support for Ukraine just at the moment. It also explains who actually did the deed. But it's one of these moral dilemmas whereby you're thinking, yeah, the outcome was really positive for Europe, for Germany, and for Ukraine. Weaning Germany, for example, off Russian hydrocarbons was expedited by the destruction of that pipeline. Was it good and right to have done that? Depends what your moral calculation is, what your moral framework is under a form of consequentialism, where the consequences of an action beget the obtain the moral value. Then you can argue that this was, in the long run, a good thing, a an evil for a greater good, if you like. But again, that it depends whether that's your kind of moral evaluation flavor, or whether it's some other framework that you use and how you slice and dice the facts there. Okay, Lithuania plans to cancel customs cooperation agreements with Belarus and Russia. They are planning to stop exchanging information with the customs authorities of the two countries, according to the Lithuanian side, the cooperation between the countries was actually suspended in 2022 when Russia invaded Ukraine. Ukraine initiates a free trade agreement with free trade agreement talks with Guatemala to boost economic cooperation. Guatemala has actively supported Ukraine in international forums since Russia launched its all-out war on Ukraine. Now, I have played you I played you one speech at the UN by Guatemala. I presume it's their ambassador to the UN. It might have been their president or prime minister or whatever. But I remember playing that to you because it was an absolutely fabulous rhetorical put down of Russia and support for Ukraine. So Guatemala have been strong in supporting Ukraine, and it's no surprise that Ukraine will be trying to forge a free trade agreement with them, especially since Guatemala sits in South America. And there are some countries in South America that Brazil, we're looking at you, that aren't so obviously in support of Ukraine. So it's really important to garner and nurture that support in the global south in South America in this case. Now, the Kiev Independent reports that they report the U.S. senator who is Mark Kelly, who is the Democratic senator for Arizona, who was tipped to possibly be the running mate for Kamala Harris, the vice presidential pick. He was one of 3 or 4 who were front runners. He ended up not getting it, but he's now said the incursion into Kursk Oblast could, quote, change the tide for Ukraine. During an interview on CBS's Face the Nation yesterday, US Senator Mark Kelly said that Ukraine's incursion into Kursk Oblast could help Ukraine change the course of the war in the country's favor. Referring to the incursion into Kursk Oblast, Kelly said that he believes, quote, the Ukrainians have done something unforeseeable that could really change the tide of how this conflict is going to play out, noting that 130,000 Russians have been forced to evacuate the region. When asked if the Arizona senator was comfortable with Ukraine using US provided weapons in Kursk Oblast, Kelly replied, I am at this point. Good stuff. And that's why I was quite up for him becoming vice president. Hopefully, there might be a stronger position on Ukraine than with the present administration and the anti-escalation antics of people like Jake Sullivan. Right, not only that, but we've got House Intelligence Committee Chairman Representative Mike Turner, who is a Republican, reiterating his request to President Biden to lift targeting restrictions imposed on Ukraine. Let's listen to him, just a short excerpt here.
Certainly fully support Ukraine. And I think a concern with the Biden administration's restrictions, also needing to get them modified, is Ukraine is finally in a position where they can hold Russia accountable. If they can, they have now entered into Russian territory. If they can use long-range weapon systems to hold accountable Russia's valid military targets that are attacking Ukraine, we can change the dynamics on the ground. You can't continue to just have a front line in Ukraine where Russia is outproducing weapon systems that Ukraine from what Ukraine has, and have this turn out well for Ukraine. In this instance, if the Biden administration's restrictions are lifted, we also know even if there is a Harris administration that follows, that Ukraine's support would be there, the ability to hold Russia accountable would be there.
So it's really good to hear that he is in support of lifting of those targeting restrictions. Now, Kiev Independent again reports that Russia has denied the reported indirect negotiations with Ukraine were to take place to halt energy strikes. So, Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova denied on August the 18th a report that the country was entering indirect talks with Ukraine in Qatar on mutually halting strikes on energy infrastructure. Washington Post reported yesterday, citing undisclosed sources, that Russia was preparing to enter secret indirect talks with Ukraine to mutually stop attacks on energy infrastructure. According to the Washington Post, Ukraine's incursion into Russia disrupted plans for those talks. In response to the report, Zakharova said that no one broke anything off because there was nothing to break off. There have been no direct or indirect negotiations between Russia and the Kiev regime on the safety of civilian critical infrastructure facilities, she added. I don't know if this is true. I don't know whether they were going to have some kind of deal until Ukraine invaded Kursk. But all I can tell you is that invading Kursk is a really bold move by the Ukrainians. It's going very well at the moment. Possibly, I don't know if last roll of the dice is a correct way of saying it, but it's the big thing that Ukraine are able to do at the moment. I'm not sure they have the capacity to do anything else elsewhere at the same time, or even going forward. I think this is a big game um, of chicken, as I've explained before. And if indeed there's a great meme that I've seen that really describes this. I'm sure it's on my threads somewhere along here. Senator Lindsey Graham is also, yeah, this is one. Um, yeah, it's that I love that image because you've got Ukraine invading Russia and you've got Russia invading Ukraine, and then Russia saying, "Hey, you can't do that. You're not allowed to do that." But this is a game of military chicken where I think the Ukrainians have done this to see if the Russians crumble. But there's a chance that the Ukrainians could crumble in Kursk because of the advances that the Russians are making into Pokrovsk. And so, therefore, yeah, it's this kind of game of chicken. But I think at the moment, it looks like Ukraine have a better handle on and better ability to do more damage, I think, in Kursk than Russia can do into Pokrovsk region, which is why I think you're starting to see Russia hammer some of those towns and cities around Pokrovsk uh, indiscriminately, trying to cause as much damage as they possibly can because they realize that they're going to struggle more and more with doing these kind of maneuvers along the front line. So it's really interesting to see how this push and shove shapes up, and to see whether Ukraine's successes forces the Russians to capitulate in any way or vice versa. We'll just have to wait on and see. I don't think either side has an awful lot more left in the tank, so it could be a fairly critical time we're entering at the moment. Let me know what you think. Anyway, thanks for listening. Appreciate all your support. It's a bit of a long one because I haven't done a geopolitical update for a number of days now. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.